My parents sneered at my graduation, and the old man from 12 minutes away finally walked in. Raising this girl was the biggest mistake of my life. My mother's voice cut through the RISD auditorium like a knife. She stood up in the third row, turned to the strangers behind her, and spoke loud enough for half the hall to hear. We wasted so much money on her. My father sat motionless beside her, offering no protest. Then she looked me dead in the eyes, right as I clutched my freshly earned master's diploma, and hissed with pure venom, "Smile, Clara, don't embarrass us any more than you already have." The entire auditorium went silent. Hundreds of eyes burned into me. I said nothing. I just held my diploma tighter. But in the last row, an old man my mother swore had died decades ago slowly rose to his feet, gripping a faded canvas bag. He started walking down the aisle toward the stage. In the next 12 minutes, my mother would regret every single word she had just spoken. My name is Clara Whitmore, 24 years old. If you've ever been publicly humiliated by your own parents, comment "I felt that" below. And if you want to know what was inside that old man's bag and why my mother's face turned white, hit subscribe right now to understand what my mother had to see land in front of her and what that old man had spent 20 years carrying. I have to take you back to a Christmas dinner in 2013 when I was 12 years old. We had roast that year, and my mother poured herself the good wine into a Waterford glass she brought out only when there were witnesses. My sister Genevieve, who was 18 and had just received her acceptance letter from Providence College, sat to my mother's right and glowed. I sat across from her. My mother lifted her glass. She thanked Genevieve for what she called returning the investment. Then she pointed her glass in my direction and added, in a voice she thought was funny, that I had cost more than the roof that year. She looked up at the ceiling as she said it. My father laughed a beat later than everyone else. Genevieve took a sip of sparkling water and did not look at me. I remember reaching for the small clay bird I had made in school and hung on the tree. It was crooked and had one wing shorter than the other, and I had thought about it for weeks before I put it up. Later that evening, Genevieve knocked it off the branch when she walked past. She said the word, "Oops." She stepped over the pieces. My father left the dining room during dessert. He walked out to the front porch and stayed there for 20 minutes. When he came back, his eyes were red. My mother did not ask why. She poured herself more wine and said, "Douglas, you missed the story about Clara's math grade. I think about that Christmas often, not because it was the worst moment of my childhood. It was one of the average ones. It was the temperature we lived at. Every year for as long as I can remember, my mother had a specific way of talking about me. She never called me the daughter she was proud of. She called me the daughter she was raising. Raising in the way you raise a project or a debt. If she had a stressful month at work, I became the reason. If Genevieve came home crying about a boy, I became the topic that pulled Genevieve out of it. If my father hesitated on a purchase, I became the item they should cut instead. My mother did not say she loved me and did not say she hated me. She said what I cost. By the time I was 16, I had learned the shape of it. The Rhode Island Governor's Youth Arts Award had a new category that year. The first year they included a stipend of $6,000 for the winner. My high school art teacher put my portfolio in. I won. The ceremony was in a folding chair room in Providence on a Tuesday evening. My mother had a dental conference. Genevieve was at the mall. My father came, alone, and sat in row 4 in a jacket that was too heavy for spring. Afterward, the principal shook my father's hand and told him he must be very proud. My father said quietly, "I know someone who is." I did not ask what he meant. I was 16. I thought he was talking about my art teacher. On the drive home, he asked to hold my framed certificate. He took a photograph of it on his phone. He did not send it to my mother. That night, back in my small bedroom, I sat in the little oak chair in the corner and read for 2 hours. The chair had been in that corner for as long as I had been alive. It had 5 uneven stars burned into the backrest, and it was the exact right size for a child who wanted to read. My mother had told me, more than once, that it had come from a thrift store and was junk. "Don't get attached," she said. "I keep meaning to throw it out." I read in that chair for 20 years. I moved it into 5 different bedrooms: my nursery, my grade school room, my teenage room, my dorm at RISD, my apartment in Providence. Every time I packed, I told myself I would leave it. Every time, I brought it. I never asked, after the age of 8, where it had actually come from. I had learned by then that questions about certain things made the temperature in the house drop. There are 3 sentences my mother said to me at 3 different ages that I remember exactly. At 7, she said, "You cost this family." At 14, she said, "You know what you cost us." At 20, she said, "You are what we cannot afford." She never once told me what I had actually cost. She only told me that I had. The house I grew up in was a yellow salt box on the corner of Papasquash Point Road and Bay Street in Bristol, Rhode Island. It had 2 stories, a small side workshop that was always locked, and a front porch that looked out onto the water. It was older than every other house on the street. My mother called it the Whitmore family home in a voice she used only for people who were meeting her for the first time. The Whitmores had owned it since 2005. My mother told strangers we had roots there. In the strictest technical sense, she was telling the truth. There was a locked shed off the side yard I was not allowed to touch. There were initials cut into the concrete of the foundation near the back porch, WH, and when I was 7, I asked whose they were. My mother told me some workmen's, from before we bought the place. She told me to stop looking at them. I stopped looking at them. I did not stop noticing they were there. The house had a particular set of rules. Do not mention its age to guests. Do not touch the workshop. Do not accept anything, including cookies, from Marianne across the street. Do not ask about the initials in the foundation. Do not bring up your father's parents at the dinner table. I understood, without ever being told, that these were not ordinary rules. Ordinary rules protect a house from strangers. These rules protected my mother from my questions. Marianne Ashcroft lived directly across the street. She was, when I was small, my favorite adult in the world, and my mother's least favorite. Marianne was tall and thin and kept her white hair in a low braid down her back. She had been widowed twice. She had taught foundation studies at RISD for 40 years before she retired. In my mother's mouth, it sounded like an accusation. Marianne had 2 blueberry bushes in her front yard, planted long before I was born, and she baked pies with them every August. She had a hand-bound Rolodex on her kitchen counter that I could see through her window from my bedroom. She had a rotary phone that still rang. Marianne asked me small questions at odd intervals. She would call across the fence and say, "Your bus gets in at 4:02 on Fridays, doesn't it, honey?" She would tell me she saw the light on in my bedroom last night. Was I reading late? She would ask what time I planned to be home from RISD for the winter break. She kept a mental record of my life. I did not, as a child, find this strange. I thought it was what neighbors did. My mother did not think it was what neighbors did. I was 14 on a warm Saturday in April when Marianne leaned across the fence and told me, without any warm-up, "This house has more history than your mother lets on." I laughed. She did not. She turned and went back inside her house. I asked my mother about it that night. My mother said Marianne was old. Her memory was going. I should not listen to her. She said it in a way that meant the topic was closed. I closed it. But that spring I noticed something. I noticed that Marianne, when she watered her blueberry bushes, watered them exactly the same way. A small circle around each root, 3 counts of the can, and then a step back to look at them. She was not a woman who had lost her memory. She was a woman who repeated the same rituals a person repeats when they have been doing them for 48 years. Later, when I did the math, I realized that if she had planted those bushes when she was 30, she would have planted them the same year the yellow house was built. The workshop I was never allowed to enter had been built by hand, joint by joint. Every hinge on its door had been forged, not bought. I noticed that only at 19, home from RISD for a weekend, walking past it in the rain. I did not have the word for what a joiner's hand looked like at 19. I do now. That workshop had not been built by a workman. It had been built by someone who loved it. I did not know at 19 that the same someone had built the house. The first time I asked my mother about her father, I was 9 years old, and my 4th grade class was making a family tree. I brought home a piece of construction paper and a set of crayons, and I asked her the names of her parents. She wrote down 2, without hesitation. Adele, Warren, Hollister. Then, underneath, in small print, she wrote both deceased, 1998, and handed the paper back to me. I asked her, in the careful voice I used to ask my mother careful things, if she had loved him. No, she said, without looking up. I remember thinking, at 9, that this was the answer of someone who was too tired to explain. I did not think it was the answer of someone who was lying. I finished my tree, and I put small red X's over their names, and I turned it in. My teacher, who had lived in Bristol her whole life, kept me back after class the next Monday. She asked me gently if I knew where my grandfather was buried. I told her St. Mary's Cemetery because that was what my mother had said. "Are you sure, sweetheart?" I said I was sure. She let me go. I did not ask my mother whether we could visit the grave. I already understood that a graveyard was not a place my mother would take me. 6 weeks later, I was helping my mother clean out the sideboard in the dining room. I opened a photo album and a Polaroid fell out onto my lap. It was a man in his late 40s, sitting on a porch, holding a baby in a white sleeper with a small yellow duck on the front. I asked her who it was. She snatched the photo out of my hand, tore it in half, and threw both halves in the kitchen trash. "A family friend from years ago," she said. "Not important." "He was holding a baby," I said. "Not you," she said. "Stop asking." That night, after everyone was asleep, I went back to the kitchen and looked in the trash. I found one half of the photo. It was the half with the porch. The porch railing had a specific decorative curl in the wood at the corner. It was the same railing as the yellow house I lived in. The other half was gone. My mother had taken it out and destroyed it separately. I put the half I had found in a book on my shelf and did not look at it again for 11 years. I was 20 when a therapist asked me, out of nowhere, about my grandparents. I had gone to her for anxiety. I told her both were dead. She was very quiet for a long time, and then she said, "When you said your maternal grandfather was dead, your voice went up at the end. Do you know why?" I did not know. I told her I had never known him. He had died before I was born. She said, "Are you sure that's what your body remembers?" I did not schedule another session. I told my mother about the appointment 2 weekends later. My mother offered to come with me. I said yes. When we sat down in the office, the therapist opened her mouth to speak, and my mother stood up and walked out. In the car on the way home, she did not mention it. She played the radio. She stopped at a drive-thru for coffee. She asked me if I wanted a scone. 6 years later, 3 weeks before graduation, I was home for a weekend in March, and my mother asked me to help her sort the mail. I opened one envelope she had put aside. It was a Christmas card, addressed to Colette Whitmore, and stamped across the front in my mother's own handwriting was the word "refused." The return name had been crossed out with such force that the paper had torn. The postmark was Portsmouth, Rhode Island, zip code 02871. I looked up at my mother and asked who sent us mail from Portsmouth. "No one," she said. She took the envelope out of my hand and put it in the trash. That night, after she went to bed, I went into her desk. In the second drawer, bound with a red rubber band, I found 9 identical Christmas envelopes, all postmarked Portsmouth, all addressed to my mother, all stamped refused in the same handwriting. The oldest was from 2017. The newest was from December of last year. I did not know, that night, that my mother had been receiving one every year for 20 years. I only knew she had kept the last 9. I put them back where I found them. I closed the drawer. I stood in the dark hallway for a long time. If your mother ever refused a card from someone she was afraid of you meeting, tell me the one thing you found later that made everything make sense. I read every comment. Before I tell you what I did next, I need you to see the wedding my sister had. My sister Genevieve got married in August 2019 at the Bristol Yacht Club, 100 yards from the water. She was 24. Her fiancé was a marketing executive named Timothy Ellsworth, who was 30 and had a very nice jaw and no strong opinions about anything, which was, I understood at 17, what my mother had picked him for. I was a bridesmaid. The summer before the wedding, when I was 16 and home from summer camp early, I overheard my mother on the kitchen phone with a caterer. She was confirming a $28,000 budget for the reception. I remember the exact number because that was the same day I had asked her, in the morning, for $340 for the art supplies I would need for my senior year AP Studio art class. She had told me, over the phone with the caterer 3 hours later, that we were stretched thin, that I would need to learn to make do. She wrote the check to the caterer that afternoon with the same pen she had used to refuse me. I did not learn until much later how much everything had cost. My mother gave Genevieve $28,000 for the wedding, $75,000 for the down payment on her and Timothy's first house in Warren, Rhode Island, and $42,000 for her MBA at Bryant University. $145,000 in overt cash support between the ages of 18 and 24. Overt meaning documented. Meaning she wanted my sister to know. Meaning she wanted the world to know. At the rehearsal dinner the night before the wedding, my mother gave a formal toast that she had written on index cards. She thanked my sister for being the daughter she could always be proud of. She raised her glass. She said, "To Genevieve, proof that some investments do come back." Everyone at the table laughed. My father clapped once and stopped. I was standing near the bar. I looked at my hands. Marianne Ashcroft, who was not invited to the wedding, stopped by the rehearsal dinner with a small wrapped gift for Genevieve. My mother received it at the door with the expression of someone accepting an eviction notice. Marianne did not stay. On her way out, she pressed a card into my palm without stopping. I read it later, in the bathroom, standing in a peach Dupioni bridesmaid dress my mother had ordered one size too small. It said, in Marianne's careful hand, "You are worth every dollar, honey." I did not, at 17, know what to do with a sentence like that. I put the card in the pocket of the dress. I still have it. 3 years later, my niece Rosalind was born. She is my sister's daughter. She was 5 in the spring of my graduation. She has soft brown hair and a chin I would only later recognize as my grandmother's, and she loves picture books about horses. In September of 2023, when Rosalind was 3, she came to my Providence apartment for the afternoon while Genevieve was at a work conference. I made her cereal for dinner. I poured with too much enthusiasm. Some of it spilled. Rosalind flinched. I put down the bowl and sat next to her. I asked her, in the voice I use for scared things, if she was all right. She said, "Mommy doesn't like when I spill. I'm expensive to feed." I asked her where she had heard those words. She said, "Mommy says I cost her the fun year." I fed her the cereal one small spoonful at a time. I told her she could spill as much as she wanted at Auntie Clara's. I told her that at my house, the only thing that cost anything was the cereal, and the cereal was cheap. That night, after Genevieve picked her up, I sat on the floor of my apartment for a long time. The little oak chair was in the corner of my bedroom. I stared at it. At Christmas dinner 3 months later, my mother let something slip. She was complaining about the practice, my father's dental practice, which had been slow that winter. And she said, quickly and without emphasis, "I've been carrying this family since I borrowed against this house." My father coughed. He said her name, one word, Colette. My mother did not miss a beat. "Since we bought this house." But I had heard her the first time. 3 months after that, on a Monday morning, I would walk into the Bristol Town Hall recorder's office, and I would ask, in a very calm voice, for the property records for the yellow house on Poppasquash Point Road. That was still 6 weeks away. Before that day, I had one more conversation to have, and the woman who had planted the blueberry bushes 48 years ago was already on the other side of the street, watching my mother's car back out of the driveway. My mother went to Boston that April for a dental conference. My father went with her. Genevieve was at her own house with Rosalind. I drove down from Providence for the weekend and let myself into the yellow house through the front door. The alarm chirped. The kitchen was very quiet. Marianne rang the bell at 3:15 in the afternoon. She was carrying a blueberry pie on a chipped white plate. When I opened the door, she said, "I saw the light on. I wondered if you were alone." I let her in. She set the pie on the kitchen counter. She looked around the room the way a person looks at a room they used to know. I asked her, because I could not think of what else to ask, whose plate she had brought the pie on. It was chipped along one edge, and the china pattern was very old. Marianne said, without smiling, "Your grandmother's. Come in." I followed her to her own house. We crossed the street in silence. When she opened her front door, I saw, for the first time in my life, the wall of photographs she kept in her living room. There were 6 frames. I looked at each one. In the first, Marianne was standing next to a woman I had never seen before. Tall, thin, with a wide smile and a summer dress. In the second, the same woman was pregnant. In the third, she was holding a baby I recognized as my mother. In the fourth, she was standing beside a man in his 40s at a beach cookout, and he was carving a small piece of wood at a picnic table. In the fifth, the same man was holding a toddler on his knee. The toddler was me. In the sixth, the same woman, older, thinner, softer around the eyes, was holding me on the front porch of the yellow house across the street. She was wearing a yellow scarf. I sat down on Marianne's couch. Marianne poured me tea. She sat across from me. She said, "I have been waiting a long time to have this conversation, so I need you to ask me first, honey. That was the promise I made him. I can't say anything until you ask." I asked her, in a voice I did not recognize as my own, if my grandfather was alive. She said, "Yes, he has been, the whole time. He asked me not to tell you until you asked." I did not cry. I did not say anything. I sat on her couch and I looked at the photograph of the woman in the yellow scarf. Marianne slid a leather album out from under her coffee table and set it on the cushion beside me. It was embossed on the spine with the initials AMH. "This is yours to look at when you're ready. But there is one photograph I want you to see first." She reached inside the front cover and took out a single Polaroid. She handed it to me. It was a picture of the man from the 4th and 5th frames, sitting on the porch of the yellow house across the street, holding a baby in a white sleeper with a small yellow duck on the front. The baby was me. The man was holding me the way you hold something you have wanted for a very long time. Marianne turned the photograph over. On the back, in careful blue pen, someone had written, "For Ellie, first day home. Grandpa Warren, October 15th, 2001. I said the name out loud. "Ellie," Marianne nodded. "He called you that. Your grandmother did too." Your middle name is Eleanor. That was your grandmother's name. I did not know that my middle name was Eleanor. My mother had never spoken it. My birth certificate said Clara Eleanor Whitmore, but on every form my mother had ever filled out for me, she had written the middle initial as just an E, and I had assumed, because I had no reason not to, that it stood for nothing. I asked Marianne where he was. She unfolded a piece of paper on the coffee table. It was a hand-drawn map. It showed the corner of Papasquash Point Road, and then a route north to Route 114, and then east across the Mount Hope Bridge, and then a small dead-end road on the Portsmouth side. At the end of the dead-end road, she had drawn a square. She had labeled the square, in the same careful hand, Warren. At the bottom she had written, 12 minutes. He will be home on Saturday mornings. I asked her, because I had to, if he had known about my graduation. Marianne did not hesitate. He knows every semester's dean's list. He has for years. I put the Polaroid in my pocket. I picked up the map. I stood up. I told her I was going to drive over on Saturday. She said, "Take the pie." He has not had blueberry pie in a long time. I took the pie. I walked back across the street. I sat in the kitchen of the yellow house, my grandfather's kitchen, for a very long time. That night I did not sleep. I looked at the Polaroid for hours. I did the math. In October of 2001, when I came home from the hospital, my grandfather had been 49 years old. He would be 74 now, 12 minutes away, for 24 years. The Mount Hope Bridge is a suspension bridge that runs from Bristol across the mouth of Mount Hope Bay to the town of Portsmouth on Aquidneck Island. It was built in 1929. It has 2 green towers and a set of cables that catch the morning sun and hold it. I have crossed that bridge dozens of times in my life, on school trips, on beach days, on drives to see friends in Newport. I never wondered why I liked driving across it. I never wondered why I always slowed down at the middle. That Saturday morning in mid-April, I crossed it at 8:30, alone, with a blueberry pie on the passenger seat and a hand-drawn map on my lap. The Portsmouth side smelled like cut grass and diesel. The exit ramp curved past a farm stand with a hand-lettered sign advertising the first daffodils of the season. I took a right onto Bristol Ferry Road, then a left. Then a long straight run past a set of low stone walls and a horse pasture, and a house with a white pickup in the yard. Then I turned onto a dead-end road called Wapping Road, and I drove slowly to the very end. At the last mailbox on the left, in blue paint that had faded to the color of stone, was a single word, Hollister. I parked. I did not get out for a while. I could see, through the trees, a small one-story cottage with white clapboard siding. There was a carved bench beside the front door, with a small oak leaf motif along the seat. There were 2 blueberry bushes flanking the walk. I got out of the car. I took the pie with me. I walked up the path. I knocked. Inside, someone set something down. Wood, on a workbench. A soft, solid sound. Then footsteps. The door opened. He was 74 years old. He was still tall. His hair was silver and thick. He was wearing a canvas workshop apron with sawdust on the front, and he had a wood chisel in his left hand. He looked at me the way you look at someone you have been imagining for a very long time and are afraid to disturb. He did not step forward. He stepped back. He held the door open. He said, "You have your grandmother's eyes. I have been waiting a long time to see you use them." I did not cry. I did not know why I was not crying. I gave him the pie. He carried it to the kitchen. He put it on the counter. He set the chisel down beside it. He turned to me and he asked, in the same steady voice, if I would like to see where he worked. I said yes. The workshop was behind the cottage, connected by a covered breezeway. It was clean and warm, and it smelled like walnut oil and cedar. There was a long workbench under the window. There was a wall of hand tools, arranged by size. There was a shelf that ran the length of the far wall, and on the shelf were 62 hand-carved wooden birds. Sparrows and wrens and small owls, each about the size of a fist, each perfect. He walked me around the room. He showed me a rocking chair he was making for a neighbor's grandchild. He showed me a stool he was carving for a nurse who had helped him after a bad flu 3 winters back. He showed me a small child's chair sitting on a low bench, oak, roughly 14 inches tall. The backrest had 3 stars burned into it, uneven, hand-cut. I asked him what it was for. He said, "For nobody in particular. I make one every couple of years. It helps me remember how to do it right." I said, "How many have you made?" "This is the 10th. I said, "I have the first one, in my bedroom, in Providence." He set his other tools down. He put his hands on the workbench. He looked at the little chair. He did not look at me. "There's something I need to tell you, Ellie, before we do anything else." I looked up at him. "Your mother didn't lose the house. I signed it. I did not know what I was signing, but I signed it." I did not ask any more questions that afternoon. I did not know how. I stayed for 2 hours. He made me tea. He showed me a picture of my grandmother that he kept over the workshop sink. Young Adele, holding baby Colette, laughing at something outside the frame. At the end of the afternoon, he walked me to my car. He held the door open. He said, "Come back when you have the questions. I have the answers, and I have the paper." I drove home over the Mount Hope Bridge. It took 12 minutes. I did not turn the radio on. I came back the next morning. He had laid out a folder on his kitchen table. Inside the folder was one document, and beside the document was a mug of coffee for me and a mug for him, and a small plate with a piece of toast on it because he was not sure what I ate for breakfast. The document was a photocopy of a quitclaim deed. It transferred title of the house at the corner of Poppasquash Point Road and Bay Street in Bristol, Rhode Island, from Warren Hollister, sole owner, to Colette Whitmore. It was dated May 8th, 2005. I read the date twice. I did the math 3 times before I said it out loud. That is exactly 21 years before my graduation. To the day, I asked him what had happened. He told me, in short, even sentences, without embellishment, exactly what had happened. My grandmother Adele had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in November of 2004. She had died in the Yellow House on February 15th, 2005. He had been 52 years old. He had built the Yellow House with his hands in the spring of 1978, when he was 26, before he married her. In April of 2005, 2 months after her funeral, my mother had come to the Yellow House, where he was still living, where he had been living for 27 years, with a stack of papers she said were to protect the house from creditors during the estate settlement. She told him he was in a bad way, and he needed to trust her. He was in a bad way. He trusted her. He signed the papers on May 8th, 2005, at Bristol Town Hall, in front of a notary named Nathaniel Crowley, who is still the town clerk to this day. He did not read them. He signed where she showed him. In July of 2005, my mother took a home equity loan against the Yellow House for $180,000. In August, she registered a business, Whitmore Family Dentistry, with $135,000 in startup capital. The remaining $45,000 went into home renovations of the Yellow House, which she now owned. He found out in late August when he stopped by the house to bring my mother a set of children's chairs he had been making for the 4-year-old and the 10-year-old of the family. My sister was 10. I was 3. My mother met him at the door, thanked him, and asked him, in a voice she had already rehearsed, never to come back without being invited. He tried to be invited. He was not invited. He wrote letters. He was not answered. He sent a card at Christmas. It came back marked refused. He sent one every year for 21 years. 12 of them my mother destroyed. The last 9 she kept in the second drawer of her desk, and I did not know why. He did not go to court. He was 53 years old, freshly widowed, and he did not have the money or the will to fight his own daughter. He rented a small cottage 12 minutes across the Mount Hope Bridge, and he stayed close, and he waited. He said all of this at his kitchen table on a Sunday morning in April. He did not raise his voice. He did not ask me to be sad for him. He said it the way you say a fact you have already lived with for a very long time. I asked him if I could see the deed for myself. That is exactly what I hoped you would ask. I drove to Bristol Town Hall Monday morning at 9 o'clock. I asked the woman at the recorder's office for the property records on the yellow house at the corner of Poppasquash Point and Bay. She looked up at me over her glasses. She said, "That's the Whitmore house, isn't it, honey?" I said yes. The house was originally deeded to Warren Hollister in 1978. You knew that, right? I do now. She pulled the file. It confirmed everything my grandfather had told me. The 1978 deed, the 2005 quitclaim, the 2005 home equity loan, $180,000, filed in the same office. The business registration for Whitmore Family Dentistry, dated July 30th, 2005, with the same $135,000 seed capital. I asked to see the mortgage witness signatures. The witness signature on the home equity loan was my father's. I sat down on a folding chair in the town hall lobby for 10 minutes. Then I called my grandfather from the parking lot. He signed too. I know, he said quietly. He tried to make it right. That's a separate conversation. But he never told your mother he tried. I called Marianne that night at 11:14. She picked up on the second ring. I asked her, because I had to ask someone who knew all of it, if my grandmother had known. Adele told me she was worried about the house. She said, "Colette is going to make him sign it. Watch her." She died a week before it happened. I did not sleep that night. My grandmother had seen it coming. My grandfather had been warned. He had signed anyway, because his wife was in the ground and his daughter was in the doorway, and he could not tell the difference between the two griefs. I did not call my father. I drove to his office. It was a Wednesday. The last patient of the day left at 6:45, and I walked in the front door at 6:50. The reception was empty. He was standing in the doorway of his private office. He said, without looking surprised at all, "You saw the house records, didn't you?" "Sit down, Dad." He sat down. He led me past the exam rooms to the small office at the back of the practice, and he unlocked a padlocked filing cabinet in the corner. He pulled out a manila folder much thicker than I expected. He set it on his desk. I've been waiting to have this conversation for 18 years. The folder was a ledger, 12 handwritten pages. Every entry was a wire transfer from Warren Hollister, Portsmouth, Rhode Island, to Douglas Whitmore, Bristol practice account. Small amounts, quarterly. Larger amounts every fall. Sized to my tuition bill. A single line item, dated August 12, 2019, $12,000, marked first car, Subaru. At the bottom of the last page in his careful dental school handwriting was a total. $130,900, he said. Every dollar your mother has ever claimed she spent on you. The camps, the pre-college program at RISD, the 4 years of your BFA, the used Subaru you thought your father bought you at 17. None of that was hers, and none of that was mine. That was your grandfather's. So what did she actually pay for? Groceries, winter coats, the dental care I would have written off anyway. Her real out-of-pocket cost for you over 24 years is under $12,000. I looked at the ledger. 71 entries. 18 years. Does she know? She thinks I have a side income from an insurance settlement my father left me. That is what I told her in 2006. She has never asked to see a statement. It fit her theory of who I was, and she trusted the theory. I asked him how he had done it. He told me. In March of 2006, he had opened a separate business checking account, sole signatory himself. He had told my mother it held an inheritance from his own father's estate, which was mostly true. His father had left him a small amount, about $15,000, in 2003. He had put that money into the account. He had told my mother it was the whole inheritance. She had never asked for the paperwork. Every time my grandfather sent a wire, my father added it to that account and then paid Clara's expenses out of it. That was all. There was one lie, told once, and a wife who never opened a bank statement in 18 years. I asked him about my master's. Your grandfather stopped sending money at the end of your BFA. He said he wanted you to have at least one degree you could claim as entirely your own. Your master's is federal loans and the Design Fellows Scholarship. She and I did not put $1 into it. I asked him if Genevieve knew about my grandfather. She has known since she was 11. Your mother slipped once, at a dinner, and she did not walk it back. Your sister chose your mother's version. She had reasons, bad reasons, but she chose. He had a framed photograph on his desk. Genevieve, Timothy, Rosalind, my mother, and himself at a 4th of July barbecue. I was not in it. I had not been invited. I asked him what he was going to do at graduation. He asked me to let him tell my mother himself, after the ceremony, in private. He said he would move out of the yellow house within a week. He promised. He asked me, please, not to let it happen in public. I looked at him for a long time. I said, you mean, not in front of the people who will see her the way she has always let them see me? He did not answer. I picked up the manila folder off his desk. I put it under my arm. I stood up. He did not stop me. In the parking lot, I called my grandfather. I said, you should be at the ceremony. I don't want to plan anything. I just want you there. Bring the chair. I have been ready for a long time, honey. Bring the receipts, too, and a copy of the deed. I already have all of it in a bag on the workshop bench. I've been putting it in there, a little at a time, since I was 53. I hung up. I sat in my car in the empty dental parking lot for a long time. I thought about my niece Rosalind and about how she had flinched when I poured her cereal too fast. I thought about her 3-year-old voice saying I cost her the fun year. I started the car. I drove back to Providence. I had a graduation to prepare for. I woke up at 6:12 in the morning on May 8th, 2026. I sat in the little oak chair in the corner of my bedroom in Providence, and I ran my thumb along the 3rd starburn on the backrest. I photographed it. I sent the picture to my grandfather with 2 words. See you. He replied at 6:14. I will be there. The main RISD convocation was held that morning at the Rhode Island Convention Center from 10 until noon. I walked. I received a diploma cover with no parchment inside it. Parchment was handed out at each departmental ceremony after lunch. The Interior Studies departmental ceremony was scheduled for 2:30 in the afternoon in the RISD auditorium, combined that year with the furniture design cohort. About 240 guests, 5 rows of upholstered seats, a small dais at the front, a dark wood podium. I arrived at 2:15. I sat in row 2 with my cohort. My parents came in at 2:20 and sat in the 3rd row. Genevieve arrived at 2:25 with Rosalind on her lap and Timothy behind them, in row 4. Mary Ann Ashcroft entered at 2:28, in a navy dress with a gold pin at the collar. She walked to the last row. My grandfather came in behind her. He was carrying a faded canvas bag against his chest. He sat at her right side. He did not look at anyone but me. Professor Fiona Whitcomb stepped up to the podium at 2:30. She was the chair of the Interior Studies Department. She had been at RISD for the last 12 years of Mary Ann's teaching career, and Mary Ann had been her mentor. Whitcomb opened with a short welcome. She glanced once, briefly, at the last row, and then back to us. Names were called alphabetically. Mine came sixth. I stood, walked to the dais, and received the leather portfolio with my parchment inside it. When Whitcomb placed it in my hand, she held my hand a beat longer than she had held the others. She said quietly, only for me, "You have a very good grandmother friend across the street." I returned to my seat. The seventh name was called. That graduate started walking to the dais. That was when my mother stood up. She turned to the row behind her. A woman she did not know, a father of another graduate. And she spoke in the voice her old theater training had shaped for exactly this kind of moment. Raising this girl was the biggest mistake of my life. We wasted so much money on her. The seventh graduate stopped walking. Professor Whitcomb stopped speaking. My father rose slowly to his feet beside my mother, offering no protest. In the fourth row, Rosalind began to cry softly. My mother turned to me. She hissed with pure venom, close enough that only the front rows heard the words, but far enough that the entire auditorium heard the sound. "Smile, Clara. Don't embarrass us any more than you already have." The entire auditorium went silent. Hundreds of eyes burned into me. I did not respond. I looked forward. My thumb found the third star burn on the leather portfolio in my lap. In the last row, an old man my mother believed had died decades ago rose slowly to his feet. Mary Ann placed her hand briefly on his forearm and let go. He walked down the center aisle. He was not fast. He was not slow. He carried the faded canvas bag against his chest with both hands. His footsteps were the only sound in the room. Halfway down the aisle, my mother turned to see who was walking. Her face changed. She stopped mid-sentence. My father sat back down. He put his face in his hands. Genevieve raised her phone to record, and then, seeing him, she lowered it again. My grandfather reached the front row. Professor Whitcomb took one step forward on the dais and, with a small gesture, invited him to the podium. She stepped back. My grandfather set the canvas bag on the podium and unzipped it. My mother whispered, "No, Fiona, no." Whitcomb did not answer her. My grandfather took out 3 things. He placed them on the podium one at a time. First, a small oak chair, about 14 inches tall. 5 uneven stars burned into the backrest. He set it upright, facing the audience. Second, a bundle of check receipts, bound with a rubber band. He set it beside the chair. Third, a single sheet of paper. The photocopy of a quitclaim deed. The date circled in blue pen at the top. May 8th, 2005. He set it beside the bundle of receipts. He looked out over the auditorium. He did not smile. He did not clear his throat. "I am not here to speak long. I am here to leave 3 things in this room." He pointed to the chair. "I made that for my granddaughter when she was 3 years old, on the porch of the yellow house at the corner of Papasquash Point and Bay. It has been in her bedroom for 21 years. Her mother told her it was thrift store junk." He pointed to the receipts. "That is the running total of what I have quietly paid for my granddaughter's summer camps, her pre-college program at RISD, her 4-year undergraduate tuition, and her first used car. It comes to $130,900. Every dollar was routed through her father at my request because her mother had cut me out of her life. My daughter has spent 24 years telling the world she carried my granddaughter. She did not. I did, quietly, from 12 minutes away." He pointed to the deed. "That is the paper my daughter asked me to sign 21 years ago today, 3 months after her mother's funeral, when I was too grief-stricken to read what she put in front of me. I signed it. It transferred the yellow house I built with my own hands in 1978 into my daughter's name. She took out $180,000 against it. She used 135 of that to start her husband's dental practice and 45 to redecorate. Every dollar my daughter has ever spent on her older daughter, the wedding, the down payment, the MBA, came from that loan, which came from that house, which was not hers. He paused. He looked at my mother once. My granddaughter is not a waste of money. Every dollar my daughter claims to have spent on her came from a house she took from a man who had just buried his wife. He looked at me. His voice softened. I am sorry. It took me 20 years to make this room see you, Ellie. He stepped back from the podium. He did not sit down. He stood beside the dais. The room did not applaud. It did not know how. If you have ever been the person who was told to smile through the humiliation, this is your reminder. Silence is a language too, and the people who love you are usually the ones who taught you how to speak it without cruelty. My mother tried to stand. Her chair scraped the floor. Her knee did not hold her. She sat back down. My father's shoulders shook, silently in his chair. In the fourth row, Rosalind reached her small hand toward the little chair on the podium. Genevieve pulled her hand back. Professor Whitcomb stepped forward. She said quietly into the microphone, "We will move the reception to the department gallery." The guests began to rise. My mother did not follow the crowd. From the last row, Marianne Ashcroft stood up. She held the leather album against her chest. She did not walk toward the podium. She walked toward me. She said, in a voice only I could hear, "There's one more thing you need to see, honey, and it's not about you." The Interior Studies Gallery was 2 floors below the auditorium. About 20 guests followed us there. My mother did not. My father did. He stood by the far window, looking at nothing, his tie loose, his hands in his pockets. My grandfather sat on a padded bench near the entrance. Marianne set the leather album on the bench beside him. I sat between them. The album was embossed on the spine with 3 letters, AMH. I asked Marianne whose initials those were. Adele Marianne Hollister. Your grandmother's middle name was Marianne. She was named after my aunt. That is how she and I became friends when I moved into the house across from theirs in 1979. I was 29, and I had just been widowed for the first time. I was Marianne to her. She was Adele to me. That is how it started. I opened the album. The first page was the Polaroid I had already seen. For Ellie, first day home, October 15th, 2001. On the right side page, in my grandfather's handwriting, she has her grandmother's hands. The second page, a photograph of me at 18, walking to the school bus stop on a Friday afternoon. On the right, she wore Adele's yellow scarf today. Someone must have kept it. I put my hand on my throat. I had been wearing a yellow scarf that year, one I had found in the coat closet of the yellow house and taken to college because I liked the way it looked. I had not asked whose it had been. I turned pages. Everyone had a photograph on the left, dated in Marianne's careful hand. Everyone had a note from my grandfather on the right. Me at 19, on Marianne's porch, laughing at something Marianne had said. She laughs the way Adele did, from the same side of the mouth. Me at 20, in a coat too thin for December. She should have a better coat. I'll tell Douglas. I remembered, that Christmas break, that my father had shown up unexpectedly with a new wool coat. My mother had asked where the money had come from. My father had said, insurance settlement. She had not asked again. Me at 21, holding my BFA parchment on the RISD lawn. Not one photograph, but 4. From 4 different angles, all from the far edge of the lawn, all from behind a tree. I looked up at my grandfather. He said quietly, I was there. I stood behind the willow. I did not want to disturb you. Marianne took the pictures. Marianne said, he waited an hour after the ceremony ended before he crossed the bridge back home. I turned pages for a long time. 218 photographs, 6 years, everyone dated, everyone commented on, everyone delivered, monthly, in a brown padded envelope from Marianne's post office box in Bristol to my grandfather's mailbox at the end of Wapping Road in Portsmouth. I reached the last page. The last photograph was not of me. It was of Rosalind, my 5-year-old niece, standing outside her preschool in Bristol on a Friday afternoon, with her small hand curled around the chain-link fence. On the right side page, in Marianne's handwriting, April 17th, 2026. She was crying at the fence. Her mother had left 40 minutes earlier than pickup. I closed the album. Marianne did not wait for me to ask. She said, "I wasn't going to let it happen twice." My grandfather looked at me. "You are going to have to decide about her, not today, but soon. I am not going to be able to help her the way I helped you. I don't have the years for it." I did not answer him. I stood up. I walked across the gallery to my father, who was still standing by the window. I took his hand, not in forgiveness, in selection. I said, "You are going to help me with Rosalind." He nodded. He did not speak. I walked back to Marianne and my grandfather. I picked up the leather album. I picked up the little oak chair, which someone had brought down from the auditorium. I picked up my leather portfolio. I tucked the parchment into the crook of my arm. I turned to leave. Genevieve was standing at the gallery door. "Clara, where do you think you're going?" I did not stop walking. I said, "To carry things you never had to." I stepped out of the gallery, into the sunlight on Angel Street. I did not look back. I moved into my Providence apartment full-time. I accepted the design firm offer I had already been extended. I turned my bookshelf to face east. I bought a chisel. Every Saturday morning, starting the second weekend of May, I drove across the Mount Hope Bridge to my grandfather's cottage in Portsmouth. It took 12 minutes. I did not, ever, turn the radio on during the drive. He taught me to carve. He taught me the leaves first, never the birds. Birds are last. He said, in my second lesson, "You have to know what a hand looks like when it's holding a piece of wood before you can carve a bird. Leaves teach you the hand." I made a lot of ugly leaves that summer. Marianne came over on Sundays with a pie. My mother refused to leave the yellow house. My grandfather told me, on our third Saturday morning, that he had visited an old friend at the Bristol Bar Association. Rhode Island's statute of limitations on real property fraud is 6 years. 21 years past, the quitclaim is legally untouchable. My grandfather told me this without bitterness. He wanted me to know he had checked. He said, when I asked him if he wanted the deed challenged, I asked, "It's too late. 21 years. But even if it weren't, the house is not what she stole. She stole time. That is what I want back. From the years I have left." He kept the attorney's note on his refrigerator. It said one line, "Statute expired 2011. I'm sorry." Marianne stopped speaking to my mother. My father moved out of the yellow house in the second week of May and rented a small apartment in Barrington. He calls me every Sunday. He does not ask for anything. He asks how the leaves are coming. Genevieve called me twice in May. I did not pick up. In July, my father brought Rosalind to my grandfather's cottage for the first time. Genevieve did not come. Rosalind was 5. She was quiet on the drive. She held her father's hand walking up the path. My grandfather met them at the door. He knelt down. He said, "Hello, Rosalind. My name is Warren. I made your Auntie Clara's chair when she was your age. Would you like to see where I make chairs?" Rosalind nodded. He took her to the workshop. He showed her the 62 birds on the shelf. He asked her which one she liked best. She picked a wren. He set it in her palm. I had been working on the little oak chair for 6 weeks. I had planned the seat and re-inked the 5 uneven stars on the backrest. I had refinished the joints with walnut oil. I had drilled a small brass plate to the underside. The brass plate said, "For Rosalind, carry this forward. Grandpa Warren, Summer 2026. I brought the chair to the workshop that afternoon. I set it on the floor. I did not point it out. Rosalind walked past it twice. On the third pass, she stopped. She sat down in it. It fit her the way it had fit me at 3. She looked up at me. "Auntie, is this for me?" I said. "It always was. It just took a while." She asked my grandfather for a story. He sat on the low bench beside her and told her about the wren. About the first wren he had ever tried to carve, back when he was 29 and had just built the yellow house, and how badly he had carved it, and how his wife had laughed at him and then put it on the mantel because she loved it anyway. Rosalind sat in the chair with the wren cupped in her hands. She listened. I stepped outside the workshop for a moment. I stood in the driveway. I watched a light breeze move the leaves of the 2 blueberry bushes at the front of the cottage. I thought about the Polaroid I had hung on my apartment wall in June. My grandfather at 49, on the porch of the yellow house, holding me on the day I came home from the hospital. I had put it in a plain wood frame Marianne had given me. I thought about my niece and the wren. I thought about my grandmother, whose middle name was mine. My parents were right about one thing. Raising me was expensive. What they did not know, what my grandfather knew every one of those 20 years, is that I was never the expense. I was the inheritance.